This movie's important. It's important. It sends a message. So.
Do you have your top 5 indie tips?
Top 5 indie tips. Don't become an indie. Get used to being broke. Stay passionate even though everybody tells you you're a f*** up. Let me see. If you're indie filmmaking, get good lighting. That's the most important part of filmmaking, is lighting. And number five. Order off the dollar menu. One of the things that I learned the most from when making Surviving Indie was how hard it is to put yourself out there. And kind of just what that means. Like you do it and you're suddenly like responsible for everything that you've done up to that point, every decision that you've made, even if it wasn't a willing decision. Like some things I didn't want to put in the movie, some things I didn't want to focus so much on, including, you know, myself. And then the circumstances kind of just all come together and you put it out and you're responsible for everything at that point. And there's nothing you can really do about it after that. My career has just been so many curves, so many turns, so many drops, so many different things. And the reason I made this movie was because I needed to express that to people. Nobody walks the same path. Nobody does the same things to get where they are. In making this movie, I hope that I'm able to communicate to people that there's always a way out, that there's ways around getting to where you want to go, and that you shouldn't give up on something just because you didn't get there the first few times. The movie originally started out as something that had nothing to do with me. It actually started out as a series, as an episodic type of thing, and it was supposed to focus on non-developers as well as developers. It just didn't come together, right? And so whenever I was studying in More Inspector's class at UT, I thought to reboot the idea because I was still fascinated with telling those stories. So at some point, I was just kind of like, yeah, okay, maybe I'll just maybe tell my own story a little bit as well and turn the camera on myself. And that kind of led to me creating the same kind of idea, an episodic thing, but it was like a pilot type of things for a YouTube series called Richard the Indie, which was gonna follow me. Put it on YouTube, didn't do so great, you know, but you know, whatever. And I still had that itch though to like tell other people's stories. So eventually I said this episodic thing's not working out because it would be an ongoing thing. Like it would be something I would have to be constantly on top of, both, you know, production wise out in the open there, filming and setting up interviews and whatnot. And also back at home, you know, editing and producing that content and motion graphics. You know, there's all these like little factors and little things people don't think about that go into your, you know, run-of-the-mill YouTube video, let alone something much bigger. When that became too overwhelming, I said, I need a project with a start and an end, because I know I can handle that. I can start something, and as long as I know it has an end, which may not necessarily be the case with an episodic thing, I can finish it, you know. I know there's a point where I can cut it off and say, yeah, this project's done, I'm putting it out. And so that's why I made the movie. Whenever I initially did manage to get a kind of small trailer together from some of that existing footage, I sent it over to Devolver, who had distributed my last movie, Pixel Poetry. And I was just like, hey, what do you think of this? And they're like, hey, it's cool. And it was kind of like, that was it. Like that was, I was expecting them to go, hey, it's cool, let's sign it, you know? But even with, you know, an existing relationship with them, they, you know, we both knew that the film side of things is a lot harder to market than the game side of things. And so it took a little finessing, you know, it took a little like, hey, you know, could you guys help me out with this maybe? And eventually they decided to go ahead and give me a contract for that so we could distribute it through them again. Most of the money was out of my own pocket. I mean, I had some help from Devolver, like super micro funding, like $2,000 was what they had advanced me. And it was enough to get things started, right? It was enough to get things moving along. So I'd say all in all, like with my own money, I'd say like honestly the whole budget was probably just about $5,000 to $6,000. Like, and that's nothing. Like that's nothing when you have to go travel to these places to film these interviews. You're going to several cons, you know, per year, and it was just like you do the best you can. It's certainly mostly sweat equity. It's like 90% sweat equity and 10% budget, you know, that made this movie. And if I had paid myself to make this movie, then it would have been a lot more than that. But I didn't pay myself anything to make this movie. I just wanted to make this and get through with it in any way I could. You know, the traveling part of it is something a lot of people don't really factor in. They think about, yeah, I can never get out to these places. I can never, you know, go out here. I don't have the money and whatnot. And it's like, I didn't really have the money either, but I knew that I had to be out there for multiple reasons. You know, I was pitching my game at the same time I was making the movie, and I was working on the game the same time I was making the movie. So traveling did take a lot of time out of that, but I was still doing something. I was still out there. I was still networking and creating, and you know, so getting out to these places was just a matter of my network being strong and finding any possible accommodations I possibly could. Some cities I had friends in that I could stay with. Some cities I would book a hostel. You know, hostels are fairly cheap, or an Airbnb. Airbnb is fairly cheap. I did that in a lot of cities to get by. And it was just kind of like penny pinching the entire way, but I still made it a priority to be out there and talking to these people and continue building my network, because, you know, if I hadn't started doing that in the first place, if I didn't start that whole process way back at my first event, which was PAX East in 2013, then, you know, there's no way I would have ever been able to have as strong of a network as I do now, to where I do have friends in different cities I could possibly stay with, and I do have ways of finding reasonable accommodations. In an industry like video games or in film, you want everybody to feel like you're a genuine person, like you want to be genuine towards everybody you meet. And hopefully the opportunities to work with those people and hang out and possibly stay with those people at these events, those opportunities come. You just have to keep working at it and keep, you know, being genuine to people. Ultimately deciding who I wanted to be in the film, you know, it came down to who could I learn the most from. And it was really a funny thing, because I had people in mind, but it didn't plan out that way, the way I thought it would. Like, I thought I was gonna have a bunch of luminaries talking about how they got over failure. Like the scope of the project, the whole format of the project just changed so much throughout the entire production. It was so unpredictable because, you know, like when I was seeking out talent, I knew I wanted like Rami Ismail in it, and I knew I wanted like Kelly Santiago in it. But another thing to note is whenever we did that interview, whenever I did both the original interviews with Rami and Kelly, it was when I had still planned to do this as an episodic series. So those interviews were actually on the shelf in my, you know, in some dusty hard drive for over a year before I even used them. I also got people that I didn't know I wanted in this film until I knew that I wanted them, if that makes sense. One of them was a guy named Ryan Zim. And I had found Ryan through a Vice Motherboard article that covered his story. When I read that story about him being homeless in Boise, Idaho, and going from that to winning game jams and money to fund his studio and all these partnerships and all these awards and starting his own studio and building his games, you know, eventually having a stable lifestyle, I was just like wow. So I said, I have to have them in my film. I have to tell your story. And that really brought to mind a lot of the other people I could bring into the movie and tell the similar stories, you know, people you wouldn't normally have heard from, possibly because they're not household names, but they still have important stories. Another one of those people was Becca Bear down there in Austin, and she'd been working on a game called Arcadian Atlas. And when I got in touch with her, it was right after their Kickstarter campaign had ended. I followed that campaign all the way up through the end, thinking there's no possible way they're gonna fund this, it's so far off. And I was right there just like feeling the grief with them because I didn't know what they were feeling until she had told me later. But a lot of it was just like, wow, like, oh, they're so far. I feel so bad because they're not gonna make their goal. And then they made it. Like last second, so on the wire, they made it. And again, immediately it brought to mind, I said, I have to tell your story because I wanna know what you were feeling in those last hours, in those last minutes. You know? So the most interesting thing though about all of this, about talking to all these people, whether or not they were household names and telling a retrospective of, you know, like Rami telling the clone story, which has been told so many times, but I still feel it's an important story to tell, to retell to people, for people to remember, because it's something a lot of people in indie game dev go through, I feel like. And when I was talking to these people, I had gone through a lot of that stuff, but I was still going through plenty of those situations while I was working on Super Combat Fighter and Surviving Indie. And so what ended up happening was talking to these people was like therapy for me. I was getting so much just from interviewing them, like so much personal growth and so much growth as a professional, hearing their stories. And also knowing that I was going to be able to put that into a format that would help other people potentially too. It was pretty scary putting the movie out there, just because, I mean, I've been through this whole process before where I'm putting something I created kind of out into the wild and kind of just waiting like to see if people like it or not. Like I wasn't even really sure if anybody was gonna like care at all. I guess I had that with my first movie with Pixels and Polygons, which I mean, I did that whole thing on a Galaxy S3 phone, like a Samsung phone. I filmed the entire thing on it and I put it up for free because I was like, I'm not charging anybody for this, you know? But, you know, people related to it, I guess, and that was cool. But a lot of people were very vitriolic towards me. People like attack you for everything. And I mean, I don't know, I didn't know how to handle it at that time. I was like, man, people really hate me. You know, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't be doing any of this anymore. And so I stopped for a while, but when I went off and I made Pixel Poetry and I put that out, but still it kind of like came away with like mixed reviews because people didn't really understand what kind of movie I was trying to make. And I guess the other thing too is that people didn't really like understand that I had made a movie for under $3,000, which is really, really hard. I'm not a wealthy person. I can't go rent like a Red Epic or something like that on the whim and a $10,000-$20,000 cinema lens and then all this other equipment. I relied very heavily on the kindness of my friends to help me shoot this thing. Like, I was not obviously behind the camera all the time. Whenever it was me on screen, usually it was a friend behind the camera kind of like fielding me questions or directing me in a way while I'm directing them also. So, I mean, I'm ultimately the director of the movie, but my friends, the kindness of them, like I still needed their camera work. I still needed their help shooting this thing. And so I'm very happy to have people who actually believe enough in my ideas that are willing to volunteer some time to, you know, help out. And it's just the fact that they're my friends and they believe that I'm doing something good. You know, there's all kinds of these little nuances and factors, and you have to find a way to get over it constantly. And that's just the production process. That's the same way for games, for game dev. So I think when you take yourself out of that process and you're just viewing the movie, it can possibly look like something that might be subpar to your quality standards or whatever. But as I said in the making of video for my last movie, Pixel Poetry, I know my next project is going to be better. I know what I've been able to take and learn from this particular project and apply it to the next project. In this case, like to learn how to handle 4K footage a lot more properly, to learn how to handle color correction. You know, I did a lot of experimentation with color correction and stuff in this movie, so some shots might seem a little off sometimes, but that's because I was experimenting. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed to say I was experimenting. And, you know, the next project will be better. I know the next project will be better. I think everybody should have that mentality. You know, I'm not in this obviously to make money. I just wanted to make a movie particularly that was going to relate to the everyday indie developer, and particularly to help them move forward in their own careers and in their own lives. I'm not sure if I'm ready to move on with my career. I've kind of been all over the place with it. I told myself that I was not going to make movies anymore because I kind of like did my challenge there. I made 3 movies, 2 of them with Devolver Digital, and I've made a web series pilot. I've done several trailers for all these games and stuff out there, but most of my challenges lie in video game development. I've worked on a lot of games by myself that has just not come to fruition for one reason or another. I want to change that with Super Combat Fighter. I want to finish this game. There's a lot of prospects for it. Things look really, really good for it, for its future. But I will never deny that I have any idea what's going to happen in the future, because I don't. I never do. And it's kind of exciting, but it's also still scary in a lot of ways. I just know that game development is something I started in a long time ago, where I really wanted to do this with 3D art, and I really was fascinated by it, and I'm still fascinated by it, but my career path took me other places. It's time for me to correct that in a way and finish something and challenge myself and do this, you know, hopefully right this time.